to your classmates about this quote.
No.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of We have a couple of announcements this morning. Students don't forget the toy drive. So if you have a toy that you'd like to donate to someone in need, please proceed. It's public, free for all the people who are here. Also, all we need is
Yes, you do. We can see one. Oh, you're not.
Whoa! Greetings, fellow travelers. Where am I? Tomorrow is the pregnancy. I've never gotten that one before. So, where am I? Where am I? On Earth. What year is it? 2021. I am a fellow traveler coming to you from a different time and a different place. I am a fellow traveler coming to you from a different time and a different place. Since I have just arrived at the sphere of influence in the world, I'm wondering how to describe to all of you your world history in a nutshell. If I say in a nutshell, what do I mean? In a nutshell. So how do you describe something in a nutshell? Pretty small, inside, to give you a really good summary. So here's what I want you to do right now. Since I'm new to this whole Earth, instead of taking me to your leader, isn't that what all aliens say? Take me to your leader. Instead of taking me to your leader, I want you to describe to me your world's history in a nutshell. Yes, I will. I will turn the volume down here in just a second. I know I created chaos and I love it. I want you to describe to me your world's history in a nutshell. I'll give you 2 minutes to do
whatever work you may miss while you're testing, but we want to do our testing in the morning so that we're not worried about running over beyond bells during 4 o'clock. Again, have a wonderful Monday.
All of us. Obviously, my awesome performance got interrupted by that announcement, and I just kept rolling with it. So what I want you to do is, if an alien or a traveler from a different time and space arrived in this room right now, much like I did, how would you describe to that person your
world history, the world history we've just come through, in a nutshell. I want you to come up with 4 mega themes, right? So you might say something about war. You might say something about government, politics. Those are mega themes. Probably not something as small as George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's a small thing. I want you to come up with those mega themes. How do you describe world history in a nutshell? You may look all around the room for clues. Have the posters behind you all semester long. You probably just fades into the wall until I point it out. But let me remind you of Mesopotamia, Egypt. Briefly talk about China, Greece, and Rome. What else have we talked about? What are our mega units? Religion, major unit. Yeah, what's next?
War.
Well, we talked about war. We talked about feudalism. We talked about the Crusades. We talked about the Reformation, Protestant Reformation. We talked about revolutions. We talked about the world at war. We talked about enlightenment and enlightenment ideals. And the revolutions. What were the revolutions we specifically talked about? French and American. Those are actual conflicts. How else can we revolt in the world? What else have we revolted against? I think I heard it. The scientific revolution. Okay, not exactly combat or war, but a revolution nonetheless. And
Communism.
the other one, the Industrial Revolution. What you got?
Communism.
Okay, political philosophies and ideals. So I've just reminded you of all our units, right? I've said there's posters in the back. Reminded you of our big projects like the Religion Week video, the Feudalism Manor, that's outside. Age of Exploration, that's the one I kind of forgot off the top of my head. The Age of Exploration and Discovery, another big one. So, with those as a reminder, feel free to use your notes. If you want to bust out your binder, this is fun. Okay, this is a fun wrap-up to our whole class. What is world history in a nutshell? I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. You nut?
Yeah.
You are.
Can I actually eat one? Can I actually eat one?
Sure.
Can I eat one? Yeah, it's fine. I want one.
World history in a nutshell. Fellow traveler from a different time and space, what is world history in a nutshell? I didn't really plan on this, but okay. I'm not going to guarantee their timeliness or expiration date. Raise your hand if you're nuts.
I got in one. You can't. You
I'm
got
going to want one.
Go.
This is an if you want. Where am I at? Why not? Let's have some fun.
Yeah, you need to sign
You need to
it.
sign these.
Want me to autograph your nuts?
Yes.
Sure. You don't crack it, don't do that. Oh, yeah. Hey.
Oh, look.
All right, I'm offering you a single pecan if you want it.
Did you just call it a pecan? No, you did not.
It is a pecan.
World history in a pecan.
You sound like a bird.
You're going to share with a partner here in a second, so have something to share intelligently.
I got mine.
Can you actually see?
My Major League Baseball. You know how they sign it? Like, take a swing.
I'm cool now.
I feel like the Beatles.
As you should.
Beatles got shot.
As you come upstairs.
You got tangled out.
What?
I'll be here always. Thank you for
Oh, I'm gonna keep this forever. It's my favorite. David Swan. I got mine.
David Swan.
Why she's like,
World history in a nutshell. I'll give you about 2 more minutes to get your thoughts. Then we're gonna share.
why are you
Jordan,
buying
that's blank. You got my autograph, but you don't have anything written down.
Why are you buying the whole pecan, Christian?
Now, try pour it down.
Oh, does it have to be in order? No. Oh.
How do you approach it? What do you think about it?
I feel like you're not ready.
Christian Bryce. He's
Flip
actually
through your notes if you wish. This is an open notes activity.
You're gonna regret it. You ain't got no words, so you really need that. I'll take that. Look at this. You're gonna really need it.
We can use a shade.
You get a better pizza. And that's it. You ain't home, bro. You ain't the whole pecan.
I got mine on the ground.
Dude, that's gonna hurt. I'll get box. I'm trying to get mine out.
No. It's fine.
But now he might crack.
All right, if you're done, before you're wrapping up, turn to your shoulder partner, turn to someone to your left and right, and share with them what you have. Now you're sharing with each other what is world history in a nutshell. Turn to your shoulder partner, whether it's someone you like or not, whether it's your boyfriend, girlfriend, or your mortal enemy. Turn to someone that's next to you and share with them what is world history in a nutshell.
I don't care.
I love
Still
it.
mad at you, ain't
I just love it. Okay, you just
Yeah, take from experience. You got that answer. You got that middle.
All right, now turn to someone different. Whether it's your other direction, front and back, turn to someone else. What is their world history in a nutshell?
Renaissance era. Not even.
Are you identical in your thinking? Are you different in your thinking? It'd be hard pressed to think you're identical. We're all pretty independent free thinkers in here. No way that all 27 of you come up with the same stuff. Believe me, you guys come up with drastically different ideas from moment to moment. All right, now who's maybe ready to share with the group? We'll take this off because it echoes in my ears. When that movie Lightyear comes out, I'm so going to the Bacon Theater dressed like this. The pre-story of Buzz Lightyear.
Wait, really?
Yes, yes. It's called Lightyear.
Since when?
It's what, summer of this year? I just saw it on an advertisement. It's called Lightyear. It's like it's like a real story of Buzz, not a toy, but a real story of Buzz Lightyear. Anyway, when that movie comes out, on my words,
Is it like
the Friday night that it's at the Bacon County
No, they're
Theater,
still animated.
Oh,
home would be like this. Home would be in the theater dressed
Where
just
the
like
other one go?
I guess don't
my wife does. Or I'll be wearing the onesie, which is back there right now. Okay, who would like to share with me one? Let's just go onesies at a time. One of your themes of world history. What is world history in a nutshell, Julia?
Many religions.
Many religions. Would we agree to that?
Yes.
Homer.
Religion is the biggest cause of conflict within people.
Ooh, I like how he elaborated. He's got a full-on theme. Will you say it again a little louder?
Religion is the biggest cause of conflict within people.
Religion is the biggest call to conflict we'll wrap some wars into that between people of different opinions, different people. That's big. I like that, buddy. I like that one a lot. Christian.
Water is life.
Water is life. I like that one. Curious how you came up with that.
Period.
Huh?
I
I
said period.
Period. Okay. Who else? That's 3 or so. I know we all got different thoughts out there. What about it? The age of exploration. Help them
Christopher
out.
Columbus didn't discover America.
Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. So that's a fact. How could we open that up into a full-on theme? How about
White
Delaney?
males,
How we
Huh?
white males get a lot of credit for things they do.
White males get a lot of credit for a lot of things. So I'm gonna wrap those two together. I like their independent thinking. I'm gonna wrap those two together. Sometimes the written history is not the true history. Isn't that scandalous? Sometimes the people that get credit are not the people that did the work. Ooh, isn't that wild? Good thinking, both of you. Kylie, you got a lot of writing. You want to share something?
Please.
Oh, I got another
All right, Julia.
The Protestant Reformation.
Protestant Reformation. ... What about it?
It changed like religion.
The Protestant Reformation and Martin Luther influenced many centuries of history afterwards. I'll buy that. Anyone else? Christian? Like you're a deep thinker in this room. What else you got?
For legal reasons, I cannot say.
Okay, for appropriateness reasons, I will allow you to not talk. Anyone else? Do you want to know Mr. Swanson's world history in a nutshell?
Yeah.
Do you want to know how I, having read and studied world history, and let's be honest, learning right alongside you a lot of the time, do you want to know how I boil down world history into a nutshell? I'm glad that you said yes, because go ahead and turn the page over. This is Mr. Swanson's Big Four, and I really couldn't stop at just 4, so I've created a couple of honorable mentions as well. So just hang with me. This is supposed to be fun. I'm going to go over my Big Four, much like you guys had these good, deep thoughts. I really like Jackson's. He said a couple of really good things in one single sentence. I'm going to give you my Big Four. But before we get going there, I had this quote on the screen as I disappeared out of the room, and then I returned as a time traveler. What do you think about this quote? I'll read it first. One of the most important reasons for studying history is that virtually every stupid idea that is popular today has been tried before and proved disastrous before, time and again. So why should we study and know world history?
So we don't make the same mistake once.
So we don't make the same mistake twice. Anyone else want to say it in a different way? History is a cycle and does tend to repeat itself. Now, cut and paste, I wouldn't go as far as say cut and paste, like, wow, this is an identical situation that we saw in the 1400s. But thematically, I really do think we see a lot of history repeating itself. It is easy to latch onto the bad, okay, wars and oppression and power struggles, death, dying, blood and guts. It's easy to latch onto the bad. I do think we see the good repeat itself a lot as well. What Thomas Sowell here is saying is that if we would learn our own history, and hear me, 14 and 15-year-olds, if we would learn our own history better, we would then eventually have a generation in a position, okay, are you congressmen yet? Are you presidents yet? Are you leaders of industry yet? Will you be pretty shortly? In the grand scheme of things, pretty shortly, yes. If this generation can get it right, can really study it and want to understand it, you really can prevent that disastrous cycle of repeating itself. So I hope that's kind of a chew on that for a second, right? I hope that sinks in your heart and you'll really consider how you got the whole world in your hands. So, Mr. Swanson's world history in a nutshell. What I'm going to do is give you my Big Four. I'm going to ask for, I'll just do it by volunteer. Can I get a volunteer to come and crack the first nut? You know what? Delaney's right here. Delaney has nut number 1. Work with me. It's a nut. Delaney, will you crack nut number 1 and read what's inside of it?
That's money.
She thought it was money. What is it, birthday card?
Water is life.
Say louder.
Water.
Water is life. Mr. Swanson's world history in a nutshell, theme number 1. I don't know if Christian got the read ahead or if we like think the same, and that's scary in its own regard. Theme number 1 is that water is life. How have we talked about water as life in this class?
Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia. Let's take it right back to the beginning. What's the nickname of Mesopotamia?
The
Land between 2 rivers. And so what was significant about this land being between 2 rivers?
To grow crops.
It allowed a people group, the first people group on the face of the planet, to survive. Food and water are essential to life. Water is life. Did we continue to see societies pop up around water?
Yes.
Yes. Where?
Egypt.
Egypt. Let's advance it just one. But what? And then what more? China. Okay. China had 2 significant rivers.
India.
India has significant rivers, right? So that's our early civilizations. How is water used in the more present day? So let's say age of discovery and then to the present day.
Showers.
Delaney says showers, and I fully agree with that. That's important. Water is life.
Transportation.
Transportation. Okay, since we can use water for transportation, what can we now do?
Hydroenergy.
Trade.
Trade where?
Cross oceans.
Far away. Across the ocean. We can take culture, we can take ideas,
Hydroelectric.
culture, religion, hang on to that, and goods and services can now leave their point of origin, the place where they originally started, and go elsewhere, right? As far as literally around the world. And who was first to travel all the way around the world? Ferdinand Magellan. What's the fancy word?
Circumnavigate.
Circumnavigate the globe. Hang on just a second. Yes, sir.
I do.
Kurt Adams, you're in trouble. He's president or something like that. So water is life for and then Jayla, you said what? Hydroelectric power. Who made the water wheel that went onto our feudalism poster? Eli made the water wheel? Yeah, so water is life. What does religion say about water? It fell down over the weekend. I got it right there. I want you to know I didn't throw it away. I got it. What does religion say about water? So water is involved in the sacrament of baptism. Okay, the Christian Catholic sacrament of baptism. Is water magical or is it representative? It's more representative, but what does it represent?
A new life.
Life. So water is life. And then in the Christian scriptures itself, Jesus says of himself, whoever drinks the water that I give will never thirst again. Jesus calls himself the living water. Water is life. All right, world history in a nutshell, theme number 2. Can I get Trinity Bennett to come on up? Trinity has been first in this classroom every single day this semester. And I would like to ask you to open number 2. Drum roll, please. Turn face your class and read it. Those in power will always seek to stay in power. You just put it down. Those in power will always seek to stay in power. Now, I could have named a bunch of specific individuals, but I think my statement here is more thematic. Okay, more overarching, and we can grab a lot of different examples from this statement. Who are some of what is an example of someone in power seeking to stay in power? Adolf Hitler. We have just come from that lesson. It's kind of fresh on your mind. I just returned those notes to you. How did Adolf Hitler get in power? How did Adolf Hitler stay in power?
Persuasive speaking and opposing.
Attacking the
Okay, so he persuasive speaking. We talked about his ability to speak well and how he captivated audiences, brought them into his message, brought them onto his side. What is persuasive speaking? What's another one?
The younger generation.
Own the youth. So he wanted to keep his Nazi ideology in power. He was out for all of his ego. He was wise enough to know that you can't have a 1,000-year reign by yourself. Unless you find that mythical fountain of youth, who was looking for that? Ponce de Leon in Florida itself. Anyway, see how everything connects? Maybe Hitler was also looking for the fountain of youth. But no, we're saying that he was kind of smart enough to know he was mortal. Despite his ego, he knew he was mortal. He would die. So how do you stay in power for 1,000 years? You own the youth. Persuasive speaking, own the youth. What else?
Opposing,
oh, my bad.
Hang on to that. That's good.
opposing political parties.
Opposing opponent political parties, or literally imprisoning, shutting down, silencing, opposing political parties, opposing political thoughts. So big ideas from Hitler about in power, wants to stay in power. Julia mentions the Medici family. What kind of power do they wield and hold? Money. They were a money family, a banking family. From their money, what were they able to influence?
The Renaissance.
Everything is a really broad term.
They bought the place of the Pope.
So we're referencing the Renaissance time period. We're saying that they influenced the Catholic Church in a lot of ways.
That's
Pope
important.
Leo X was actually a Medici family member who essentially purchased the position of Pope, right? He bought the papacy. So money leads to a different kind of power, religious power. What type of masterpieces were they able to bring into the world because of their power?
Leonardo.
Yeah, they financed, sponsored a lot of art, and Da Vinci, and especially Michelangelo, we talked about as being a patron, or rather they were patrons of these artists, sponsors of these artists. So Medici stayed in power through fear and violence. There was a lot of palace intrigue and violence in the Medici family, but it was really their money that led them to stay in power more than anything else. What's another example? Take it back a step. What type of government is family based? If you're in this family, you'll be the
Queen.
kings and queens, which is called a monarchy. So what societies that we talked about were monarchies? Several.
China.
China was one. Okay, dynasties.
Egypt.
Egypt is a great example. The Pharaoh, I got a picture in the back of the room right there. The Pharaoh was a monarchy. The Pharaoh system was a monarchy. And then continue. Yeah, okay. A lot of European countries were monarchies. So these families, once they were in power, would want to what? Stay in power. Those in power want to stay in power, and a lot of their decisions are influenced by their desire to stay in power. So a little bit of the picture here is representative of manipulation and oppression. There's a power and oppression cycle is what we've seen, right? Those in power will oppress those who are not. And then sometimes those who, here's a real big idea. A lot of times when we see a revolution, we see that oppressed group actually rise up, stick it to the man, overthrow the people that used to be in power. What do they then do? Take over and behave like what? The same. A lot of times when we see an oppressed group rise into power, we see them start to behave in exactly the same way. Really recently, Maximilian Robespierre, right? A leader of the oppressed became oppressive as soon as he was in power. Hitler, reasonably, was a leader of the oppressed, overthrew the standing government, and then became the world's most oppressive oppressor in all time. So human nature is that once you're in power, you will oppress those lower than you. Those in power seek to stay in power. Number 3. Who wants to come up and open up number 3? I saw Jackson's hand first. Come on up. Sorry, I don't have a democratic system for this.
And you dropped the nut.
Not dignified out of the response. 3. Yeah, crack that nut.
Religion affects everything.
Religion affects everything. Religion affects everything. Name something. Already says everything. Name something that religion has affected. Government. How so? What's a government based on religion? Theocracy, right? Theo meaning religious. A theocracy is a government related on religion. What's a real easy example of a theocracy? Not quite Mesopotamia. More of a modern example, something we talked about in light of recent conflict in the world. Yeah, a lot of Muslim countries are theocracies, right? Their Sharia law is government based off of their holy book, the Quran. So theocracy, religion affects government in that regard. What about the nation of Israel? How does religion affect the nation of Israel?
Three major religions have
Okay, for starters, 3 major religions have a stake in the city of Jerusalem, but the boundaries of Israel, it is presently the homeland to what major religious group? It's considered the homeland to the Jewish people, and then Jackson kind of takes the next level and says there's conflict because 3 major religions have a stake in the city of Jerusalem and certain holy sites inside of Jerusalem. Has religion ever caused a war?
Yes, the Crusades.
No. The Crusades, perfect. Wars, a series of wars, straight up motivated by religion. Has religion ever caused a genocide? The murder of an entire people group?
Yes.
Name it. Hitler and the Jews is a great big starting point. A couple of lessers that, unfortunately our class doesn't necessarily have time to dive into all of these, but there's been many genocides. The mass murder of a particular people group based off of religion. Get a little more modern into Rwanda and Yugoslavia, a little bit more present day, that kind of a thing. So it didn't stop with Hitler and the Jews. Unfortunately, history repeats itself. Unfortunately, certain generations have not learned major lessons, and this genocide based on religion continues. What else? How else has religion affected everything?
Bible.
The Bible, but what is the Bible? It's a book, and what do you do to books?
Read it.
You read them. How do you read them?
Properly.
Because they've been printed. Did religion affect innovation?
Yes.
Did the motivation to spread God's word in various languages affect literally inventions? Yeah. So religion affects everything. Not many of our conversations in this class haven't started from the position of how did this people group think religiously? Who did they worship? What did they worship and why? Most of our conversations, were they in conflict because of that? A lot of our conversations in this class have started with religion. So religion affects everything. That is why in the design of this class I have a full-on religion week. Right? That's not super standard in a high school world history class. A lot of classes will just fit religion into their next unit. This is a Muslim country, this is a Jewish country, but I've kind of designed this class on purpose to have religion week so that we can deal with the big 5, and really specifically the big 3 of the 5, so that we can apply that to the rest of our learning, right? How much better did you understand the Crusades? Because we deliberately talked about Christianity and Islam. How much better did you understand the Reformation and the Renaissance? Because we specifically talked about Christianity. Now, sometimes I almost feel like the Christianity days, the 2 days we talk about Christianity, I almost feel like a Wednesday night youth pastor, right? And I really try to toe that line and not preaching at y'all because I do have personal beliefs. But I give you those thoughts so that we can understand the rest of our class. Judaism, Christianity, Islam. I give a fair shake to Islam. Fair shake. All right, moving on. Number 4, Allie, come on up. Yeah. This is number 4 of the big 4, and I do have some honorable mentions after that. Number 4, Allie Metters, let's read it.
War is hell.
War is hell. In the end, let me round out world history in a nutshell. War is hell. War is the physical location of hell, Colin, if you need to write it like that. War is hell. Now, I say that genuinely, to be real serious with you, I say that genuinely as someone who's been to war. I say that as someone who has seen conflict up front. I say that as someone that's toted a gun with the intentions of making war. War is hell. Now, this phrase comes from General William Tecumseh Sherman of the American Civil War, which we did not talk about in this class directly, but we will talk about in U.S. history. General Sherman, a Union general, who's responsible for, I'm curious if the room knows, what is he responsible for? The March to the Sea, which did what to your home? Burned half of Georgia. Yeah, a little bit north of Alma, but Sherman's March to the Sea was in Georgia. General William Tecumseh Sherman, responsible for making total war, said war is hell. And I agree, and I believe it. How have we seen war harm world history? Okay, well, we can name a lot of them. We can name the bigs. We can name a couple smaller conflicts too, right? The Crusades were war. The World Wars, both of them were wars. Various revolutions are wars. But from war, what do we see? How do we see world history
Oh, yeah.
Death. Colin, what do you got? People raise other people. That's deep. He said people raise other people's children. And so, I mean, you can peel that one back a lot. But because of war, sometimes parents die. Children become orphans. Generationally speaking, sometimes children are raised by not their parents because of war. That's deep. This is why I love this class and this conversation, is because I haven't heard it all yet. Like, I have not heard every statement that there is to make. I have not heard all of your thoughts yet. So year to year to year, like semester to semester, I love this class because I hear things like that. People raise other people's children. What else? How it works? Huh? Related to money, related to personal fortune. Some people gain power, fame, fortune, legacy through war, right? You think General Eisenhower becomes President Eisenhower without D-Day? Unlikely, right? We can't really say. We can't go back and like change that up. But a lot of people have risen to a higher power because of the fame and name recognition they gained in war. How else? What else? Disease. What did we recently talk about? War spread a particular disease. Spanish influenza. Yeah, of 1919 got spread through World War I. What if there really was a war to end all wars? What if the Christmas truce of 1914 could have been it? People laid down arms and didn't pick them back up. I don't know, right? I don't have the answer. Obviously, if we had, my whole life has changed because I don't go to war. Your whole life has changed because you don't know war. But, big idea, as long as there is sin and brokenness in the world, there will be war. Maybe that's Swanson's opinion. Maybe we see it in world history. As long as there is sin and brokenness in the world, there will be war. This is a picture of a soldier in Vietnam, okay, an American soldier in Vietnam, and I always find this picture really harrowing. Obviously, the color is popping. His bright eyes are in contrast to the drab olive green color. Otherwise, writing on your helmet is not something I would have ever done in the military. I can't really explain why there was a lack of discipline during Vietnam, but a lot of times soldiers did get to Sharpie and mark on their helmet, almost even like decorating it with their personal opinions or mottos or phrases. Again, not something that would happen in the military today. A sergeant would, beat you down if you decorated your helmet like that. But this guy in particular, he's got a pretty simple statement about how he feels the war is going. He says war is hell. All right, a couple of honorable mentions. And you can kind of jot this down. However, I know there's not a lot of space at the bottom of the acorn there. Jot this down however you see fit. There's some white off to the left as well. Honorable mentions outside the big four, but I still think honorable mentions. Guys, it wasn't aliens. Whatever the History Channel at midnight tries to tell you, it wasn't aliens. They didn't build the pyramids. They didn't make the crop circles. They didn't disappear anyone ever. It wasn't aliens. Maybe it's my opinion, but I'm giving it to you. It wasn't aliens. 2, Hitler died in the bunker. Sorry. That conspiracy theory and all the others are whack. Whack is a very technical term that means not true, right? Are there questions to be had about certain pieces of history? Sure, maybe. But I want you to think about this. A lot of the widely held conspiracy theories would involve a lot of people having a lot of information. And can I get 27 of you to be quiet on a particular topic for a single day? No. Yes. If I gave you a secret and I said for 24 hours you can't talk about it, and let's be honest, I don't have any explosive secrets to give you. Could you be quiet about it for 24 hours? Yes. 27 of you. The answer is no, right? Someone would Snapchat it before the end of the second block. So how can a conspiracy theory that would involve the silence and participation of hundreds, if not thousands of people, how can a conspiracy theory like that be true? These are my late night thoughts, and this is what I have to give you. And next, never attack Russia in the winter, period. Don't do it. Ask Napoleon, ask Hitler, ask anyone, never attack Russia in the winter. If you remember nothing else from your world history class, remember to never attack Russia in the winter. And you will be successful.
Isn't that all it's called?
Yeah, so what we didn't get into was like some graduate level discussion of why don't attack Russia in the winter. Russia is large. Russia is vast. Russia is cold. If you wanted to attack Russia, you'd have to have a long supply line of food and fuel and ammunition, and it's not going to work. Russia's too big and too cold for you to attack Russia in the winter. Never attack Russia in the winter. Side story, one time last year, it's my first year, of course, Coach Brown came into the room, and I like to banter with people when they come in the room. Right? You like to incorporate them into the conversation. I said, hey, Coach Brown, if you could tell these kids one thing about world history, what would it be? And I kid you not, we were literally talking about Russia on that day. And he said, oh, that's easy. Never attack Russia in the winter. Unprompted. I didn't tell him to say that. But Coach Brown remembers one thing from his world history class, and it's don't attack Russia in the winter. Anyway, I digress. To a couple more honorable mentions. If those were like the scandalous ones, the spicy ones, here's the sweet ones. People are amazing. People are amazing. Let me get as sappy as I can with you. Humans are amazing, right? Humans did build the pyramids. Humans did set out across an ocean without knowing what is on the other side. Humans did figure out how to navigate by the stars. Humans did create a computer and the World Wide Web and everything before, from the beginning to the end. Humans are amazing. We are all more the same than we are different. I've said this to you at least once, maybe twice. We talk about a lot of divisions in the world, and it's real easy to start seeing the world in just a couple of colors. That's black, that's white, that's brown, they're yellow, right? We could identify people groups and morality, and we could identify a lot of things with a strong line, maybe even bring a color into it. But I think we're all united by a particular color. What color is that?
Red.
Red. Why? Because we all bleed red. From Adam in the beginning to the last person ever, we will all bleed red. And in the end, with differences acknowledged, we are all more the same than we are different. And finally, not everybody does things the way I do them, and that's okay. I think a lot of you have been challenged by different societies' approach to women, right? It took a real long time for us to have a conversation about how women were treated positively. I know that's difficult to stomach today. Not every culture in its time and space approaches minority issues in the same way. Not every culture across time and space does what you think is logical, right? A lot of different cultures dealt with technology differently. They dealt with communication differently. They dealt with war differently than what would make sense to you. I've gotten the stink eye from a lot of you as I brief you, as I share with you what is a historical fact. You're like, that's dumb. Why would they do it like that? Not everybody across time and space does things the way I do them, and that's okay. So these are the honorable mentions. Now I have to ask you a question. How should it all end? We've walked ourselves past up to World War II. Yeah, there's a whole lot of history that we need to cover for the present age. How should it all end? With the Book of Revelation, the biblical rapture. I've read the Left Behind series. Sounds pretty scary. How else? I think I heard somebody say we all die. Yeah. Should it all end with we all die?
Yes.
Delaney says we're going to go the way of the dinosaurs. How should it all end? Well, let's walk ourselves up to the present, see where we're at, and then decide. Jayla? This is hang in there and listen. All right, this is just hang in there and listen. All right. So, following World War I. Now, keep in mind, as a U.S. history teacher, this is my first semester to do that. I understand how important the 50s to the 2020s are. I understand significant things that maybe could be fit into a world history class to kind of prep you for U.S. history. So I'm going to give you a couple of nuggets, and then I'm going to say you're going to see it again next semester, next year. Okay? You're going to see a lot of these themes in U.S. history because this is the time in history when following the dropping of the atomic bombs, what did the United States become?
A
Superpower, right? So at this time, U.S. history and world history, there's a lot of intersection. Okay, to teach world history is almost to teach U.S. history. And I can say, as I by name request you all to be in my honors class next year, we will flush out a whole lot of this U.S. history. Today's going to go pretty rapidly on some pretty big topics. Following World War I, following World War II, the United States becomes a globo-cop. Maybe you've seen this terribly rated R movie, Team America World Police. Whether you've seen the movie or not, and you know how bad it is if you have, the concept is that America became the world's police. What are a couple of things we did to show that we were the world's police? Following World War II, what is the next big thing where we're kind of policing the world? That's in there. Hang on to that. A little bit earlier than that. Very shortly after World War II, we find ourselves embroiled in war one more time, this time in Korea. The Korean War is a great example of the United States as a globo-cop. Did we need to get involved in Korea?
No.
Was it directly impacting America, right? Our borders, our boundaries? No. But we adopted an attitude called containment. That's a super vocab word, but we'll flush out next semester. Containment means we are not going to let communism spread around the world. So we summarize it to say the north of Korea was supported and sponsored by the Soviet Union, that is communist. We're going to flush out communism here in just a second. South Korea was being threatened by the communist north. Because we committed to the world, we will ensure that communism does not spread to new countries. We went to the Korean Peninsula to support South Korea. Long story short, over 3 years of back and forth, we invaded into the north, we retreated back into the south. The war started with these two countries being divided at the 38th parallel. Okay, that's a line of latitude. There's not a mountain range there, there's not a river there, it's just a line of latitude on the globe. But the 38th parallel is the dividing line between North and South Korea. After 3 years of fighting, where do you think the war ended? 38th parallel. Okay, the history of the Korean War is that not much changed because of the fighting. Actually, to call it a war is incorrect. Did we declare war on Korea?
No, it's a military conflict.
Military conflict, a lot of times called a police action. Just like I'm saying, we became the world's globo-cop. The last time this country ever declared war was on December 7th, 1941, really December 8th, 1941. The last time we ever declared war was World War II. Everything since Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iraq twice, we did not declare a war. That's been a military action. There's a lot to get into there, but we will refer to it as the Korean War. That's not inaccurate, but from a legal perspective, from a technical perspective, it's not a war because we never declared war. To this day, there's not peace in Korea. To this day, North and South is divided at the 38th parallel, and there is technically not a peace treaty ever having been signed. So this conflict technically has expanded from 1950 into the present day. Now, there's a lot of current events about how North Korea is today. Their nuclear power. We kind of make jokes about their supreme leader sometimes, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. Very recently, President Trump walked across the 38th parallel into North Korea, which is mind-blowing. Now, you guys are growing up in this era where it's happening. Someone like me, I'm a little older than you, definitely someone like your grandparents, parents and grandparents, they're mind blown by the idea that President Trump walked into North Korea. That's just not something that happened from 1950 all the way up to the present. So a little bit of extra there. The Korean War is a war of containment against communism. What happens next? Where do we shoot our guns next?
Vietnam.
Vietnam is a war of containment against communism. Korean War and the Vietnam War are real close to Control-C, Control-V. Copy and paste. Real close to a copy and paste, just in a different corner of the world. It's almost an identical setup. The communists are located where? In the north. And they are threatening the south. So America gets involved in the south. We're committed to preventing the spread of communism in Vietnam. Vietnam War goes on to be America's longest conflict at the time. There's a slow escalation. It started with just a couple of military members advising in Vietnam. It morphs into, upwards of 100,000 soldiers in Vietnam, and then there's the drawdown. Now, you guys, if you paid attention to the news at all, you could find a real good comparison to Afghanistan. Your whole lifetime. We started small in Afghanistan. We had a peak of troops, a maximum number of troops, and then a drawdown, and then a real chaotic exfiltration this year. You watched it happen if you paid attention to the news at all. Pretty similar, I hate to say, pretty similar, except history repeats itself, pretty similar to everything that happened in Vietnam. So we escalated, we drew down. Unfortunately, we left in chaos. And I hate to say it, the communists did overtake South Vietnam. All things considered, we lost the war. And a lot of Vietnam veterans are affected because of that. I think you will find if you got friends and family that participated in Afghanistan in any fashion, fought in Afghanistan in any fashion, I think you'll find Afghanistan war veterans will feel the same in the coming months and years as well. There are comparisons from Vietnam to Afghanistan. We will go in depth about the Vietnam War in U.S. history, but if you can kind of just start to think that America as the globo cop, the world police, is trying to support weaker countries at the expense of our own money, people, and even legacy a little bit as well. America kind of takes a couple of punches for its ineffectiveness in Vietnam. I would say we didn't have to be there in the first place. We're trying to do a good thing by being there. Got beat up a little bit in the process. There's a lot more to it than that. We'll flesh that out in U.S. history. I picked these 3 pictures on purpose, right? You can pick 1,000 pictures from the Vietnam War to try to teach it. These 3 pictures in particular focus on individual soldiers, not maps, not famous people, not presidents, but individual soldiers who fought in Vietnam. And then I'm also highlighting their helmet art, which I just kind of gave you the setup on that. A lot of people express themselves by writing things on their helmets. Guy on the left, his helmet says, "Make war, not love." A little bit of a play on "make love, not war," which is what people advocating for peace would say. You know what? Sometimes young men, not fully developed in the brain, I'll be honest on that, right? Young men go to war because they're not fully developed in the brain sometimes, maturity-wise. Homeboy there is saying, "Make war, not love. I love being here." I bet he liked being in combat. Guy in the middle, I already showed you the picture. I showed it to you colorized, and it's really harrowing to see his ice blue eyes contrasted to the dark green of the military uniform. And he says, "War is hell." I already gave you my thoughts on war as hell. And then the third one on the far right there, make sure you can read it. The writing says July 15th, 1969. It's got an arrow pointing to something. What's it pointing to? Bullet hole. His helmet worked, right? His helmet worked at least once for him. And I think it's almost like he's daring death to come for him again, right? I defied you one time. It didn't work. You didn't win. Death, Grim Reaper, however you want to see it. And he's kind of proud of that. Now, the smarter decision would be to get a new helmet, right? A helmet that's going to help you it's actually going to be strong enough to protect another bullet. But I think this guy's expressing himself by saying, "Hey, look, I defied death. What now?" Have we seen a movie clip related to someone who should have kept his helmet on?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it?
I don't know what it is.
Saving Private Ryan. So a lot of students grab onto that little scene, and I like to explain. The guy got hit in the helmet. Boom. Right? What does he do? Takes it off, followed by he gets another bullet to the brain. So keep your helmet on. Always keep your helmet on. Let's pause there and go to the bathroom. I'm reading some of y'all's eyes. I think you got the. I think you're.
Can we go the long way?
Yes.
No, we can go the short way. Because that's how I like to do it.
Still ain't happening.
No, that depends on what your days
I
are.
can miss 5 days because I haven't missed any days.
You don't have to come.
2021. Keep telling me about the world.
I have one. I know. Somebody so easy about it.
I touched Brazil this time. I didn't touch a president. I touched a flag.
Touch the flag.
All right, we get that good break.
Yes.
Oh.
Underlay.
I feel like I don't trust you. You trust me. Yeah.
So I ran into one of your fellow Earthlings from the year 2021. She asked me how I got here and what I was doing. I said I'm a time traveler from a future time and space, and I'm just here to learn about the Earth in the year 2021. I said, it's really confusing. And she said, it's confusing to us too. And I said, I don't think I'm going to stay here. I think I'm going to go where I came from. She goes, yeah, I'd go back to where you came from too. And I said, oh, no. I'm not going back. I'm going forward. So the good news is the Earth carries on. So thought that was a good little side conversation. The Earth, I'm a traveler from the future. So there is a future to be had. Don't forget that.
What's our future like?
Well, I'm still telling you about the 60s on to the present, and we'll talk about the future. So we leave, we go from the Korean War and Vietnam War, and their wars of containment. That's your buzzword that we're going to talk a lot more about next year. Containment. What are we trying to contain? Communism. And we go into a time period called the Cold War. If it's so cold, maybe it should just put a jacket on. I don't know. But the Cold War, what is a characteristic of the Cold War?
Never happened. Everything was going.
So you say it never happened?
No, like there was no military action.
A Cold War. How many bullets were fired in the Cold War? Zero. The Cold War was not characterized by shooting, but what was it characterized by? Threats is a great thought.
Oh, the show arms.
Okay, a show of force, nuclear arms race. What are these things? So, first of all, I guess I should say no, this is how I'm going to say it. The Cold War was a time of competition, not shooting, but competition between the Western world and the Soviet bloc countries. Now, when I say the Western world, I'm referring to countries that are in blue. America, obviously the superpower involved in that. Yeah, our friends to the north in Canada, they're involved in the Western side of things as well. And then Western Europe, the countries that we fought to liberate during World War I. The countries that we invaded for the purpose of liberation, right? France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, etc. Western European countries, UK, United Kingdom. These are the countries on the side of capitalism, democracy, and freedom, right? I would call them the good guys, right? The good guys are the countries in blue. Now, the bad guys, or the Soviet bloc countries, led by the USSR, the Soviet Union. A lot of times we might say Russia. That's actually inaccurate for this time in history. Russia is what we would call them today. At the time, they are the Soviet Union. And that is many countries grouped into a union. Just like we are the United States, many states in one country, the Soviet Union, same word, United Union, was many countries grouped into the Soviet bloc of countries. And these countries are characterized by communism, for one, but oppression, the lack of freedom, and I would argue they are the bad guys. These are the two sides on the Cold War. Now, no shots are fired during the Cold War. I really like this graphic because it does show kind of how close the countries are to each other, especially this portion to the north right there where Russia darn near touches Alaska.
Alaska, of course, being a United State. So this look at the northern hemisphere, the Earth from the north, really shows just how close some of these countries are to each other. Cold War characterized by competition, and if I could put it in a meme form, I really think this is pretty descriptive of what is the Cold War. It's a time period where spying was rampant. Eric just said information gathering, absolutely. But shooting, no. Big idea is that nobody ever shot at each other during the Cold War. Now, does that mean we weren't preparing to shoot at each other? Absolutely not. Eric, you just said it. What were we stockpiling during the Cold War? Nuclear weapons. Who had the first nuclear weapon in all of world history? America. Who used the first nuclear atomic bomb in all of world history? America. When? 1945. That's good. That's the year. On what other country? Japan. Where specifically? Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Good. I'm reviewing as we go. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, the stated reason for using the atomic bombs was what? To end World War II with fewer casualties, okay, to avoid a mainland invasion of Japan. But a side argument is that we use the nuclear bombs to do what?
Intimidate.
Intimidate who? Russia in particular, maybe arguably the rest of the world, right? But Russia in particular. So, Gracie, Gerardo, my story's up here. The idea was that we possibly use these nuclear bombs to show Russia what we got. Guess what, Russia? We do have this technology. We will use it. We're proving that. And so y'all back off because we have this and you don't. So what does that make Russia want? Nuclear bombs. Russia tests its first nuclear bomb in 1949. So a short 4 years later. In the grand scheme of things, 4 years later is pretty short. And from that point onward, we're the first two nuclear superpowers in the world. And this age of nuclear proliferation was upon us. The age of stockpiling nuclear weapons. At its height, I did show you this, kind of rounded out our class last week. At its height, Russia had over 40,000 bombs, and America 32, 33,000, however you read the chart. At its height. Today, presently, we have come on down from those numbers. We've reached different nuclear arms agreements. We have said it is better to have fewer nuclear bombs in the world because, guys, we don't want to knock ourselves off the face of the planet. So today, Russia has about 6,000. The United States has about 5,000.
How do you just get rid of them?
That's a great question. Kurt said, how do you just get rid of them? When you make a nuclear bomb and all the chemicals that go into it, there is a cost for disassembling them. There are areas of the earth that are nuclear waste areas, okay, nuclear waste areas that are just as radioactive as if the bomb had been used itself. Now, it's good that it wasn't used on people, but there are portions of the earth that are uninhabitable because that's where the nuclear waste has gone to go. Now, if there's more sciencey questions, I got to punch you over to McGuire, half-life of radons and junk like that. But suffice it to say, Kurt, humans should consider, we have done this thing, man, what's the cost if we ever want to undo this thing? And the cost is that certain portions of the earth are uninhabitable because of nuclear waste. Suffice it to say, we'll just advance the conversation to say there are now more nuclear powers in the world. The top two remain the U.S. and Russia at this point. But other relatively unstable governments that do have nuclear bombs include China, Pakistan, and North Korea. Our allies include France, Israel, India, and France, Israel, and India. So the world still is kind of divided between friend and foe as to who has these bombs and who can possibly use these bombs, when, where, and why. This all begins with the Cold War, the nuclear age and nuclear proliferation. My favorite competition from the Cold War is known as, we've already said it, the space race. Why is it now the space race was positive for human society, okay, the growth of humankind? How was a Cold War competition, right? We're supposedly fighting against each other, even though it's a Cold War. How is this possibly beneficial to human society? Advancements in technology, science, math, understanding of the world around us, right? So even though it was veiled in a competition, even though both countries were trying to be first, and maybe their motivations were to beat the other country, in the end, the world gained because of the space race. The world learned stuff about the moon. The world learned stuff about the atmosphere. The world increased its understanding of rockets, physics. Kids your age received an emphasis on math and science education because of the space race. In both countries. Both countries said, hey, if we want to win this space race now and in the future, we got to focus on the youth. Wow, that sounds a whole lot like Hitler, yep. But in a more positive way, countries around the world, United States, USSR, gave a bigger focus to science and math technology in schools. From the space race, we get NASA. So NASA exists because of this time period. Now, if it's a race, I'll look at Ray and Fabian here. Ray and Fabian, you're running a race, you're on the cross-country team. How do you win a race?
You run.
Run faster than others, cross the finish line, win. First. Wow, this is easy to understand. To win the space race, you have to be first. Guess what? The Soviets were first in a lot of things. The Soviets put the first satellite into space. The Soviets put the first animal into space. It's actually this dog right here. Her name is Laika. And I have a student from another block that brought in this sticker because she really likes the puppy, the dog that was first into space. The Soviets put the first animal into space. The Soviets take the first photographs of the moon, the far side of the moon. The Soviets put the first man in space. Why didn't the Soviets win the space race?
Because it was their final goal.
Because winning was putting a man on the moon. And despite the Soviets putting a lot of points on the scoreboard, the real race was to put a man on the moon. And more than that, to show the world that you did it. How did we show the world that we did it? Video and on television. So we are, what is very normal to you, television, right? You got this box in your pocket that shows the whole world to you. Television was a relatively new technology at this time. And the fact that we could show the world, put it in their living rooms, put it on a screen in their living room, we could show the world we were on the moon. That is why the Americans won the space race. You could argue that the Soviets put a lot of points on the scoreboard first, but the winner of the space race is America because of putting a man on the moon. There's a little bit more to it. We'll flush it out in U.S. history. What Sputnik actually did for the country and for the world. That's the first thing you see on the upper left. But the big idea now is that America wins the space race because of putting a man on the moon. These are two different Time magazine covers. The fella on the right, the first man on the moon, who's that? Neil Armstrong. If you didn't know that name, I thought y'all would. If you didn't know that name, you need to. Neil Armstrong, American, first man on the moon. But a name that a lot of people really don't know, not just at your age, high school level, but people around the world. And this is a name people should know. The first man in space is Russia's Yuri Gagarin. I don't want you to know Neil Armstrong and not know Yuri Gagarin. I don't see him as an enemy, right? I don't see Yuri Gagarin as a Soviet cosmonaut that is an enemy of my country. I see Yuri Gagarin as the first scientist to put himself into space. And we should know his name just as much as we know Neil Armstrong's name. The Cold War is really flushed out in Germany as well. And I think I've showed you a picture very similar to this. Following World War II, there's a lot of issues with the post-war administration of Germany. West Germany in blue is administered by the UK, US, and France. These are these Western countries full of democracy and capitalism. The East Germany is governed by the Soviets. And then you see a little splash of blue inside of East Germany. That's because Berlin was divided as well. So the Cold War is almost fought as a wrestling match inside of Germany. Instead of shooting at each other, US and USSR, we struggle with how to administer Germany and especially how to administer Berlin. That is an expression of the differences between communism and capitalism. You can see Berlin divided right smack down the middle. On the left, you can go to the store. You can drive your car. You can visit grandma freely, no problems. On the right, That is the side governed by communism, state control of resources, housing, food, clothing, shelter, very different lifestyles. Now, the Berlin Wall falls in 1991. This is literally a moment of the wall falling. We'll look at a couple different videos and documentaries in U.S. history, but this photo shows a beautiful contrast between the people closest to you. They're on the west side of the wall. The reason graffiti is on the wall is because you can walk up to the wall, you can touch it, you can paint it, you could even shout across it if you wanted to. On the western side, you were free to move about as you wished. But on the eastern side, and that's where you see the soldiers in their drab uniforms, just drab olive gray, the wall is coming down, and they, for the first time, well, they're seeing their cause crumble, but they're also seeing the faces of people on the west. They're seeing the vibrant colors. People can choose their own clothing. People have clothing that is in good conditions, not in state of disrepair. And I really like to analyze that guy's face, right? The guy in the middle, because I'll never know what he's thinking, but it sure looks like he's thinking that his cause has been lost. What he's been fighting for wasn't worth it. Maybe he's not happy in the moment, but I think in the end, he's probably glad that the wall came down. The picture, what you can see of the wall, I told you, is the graffiti, because people on the west, they could walk up to it. What do you think is on the other side of the wall? Nothing is, well, definitely not the graffiti, because you couldn't walk up to it in the same fashion, but more than nothing. You know what's on the other side of that wall? What you got? Yeah, he says communist propaganda. That's a good thought. Maybe they were trying to, project their communist beliefs. Soldiers, yep. Landon?
Barbed wire knives.
Barbed wire. You know what's on the wall? Oh, those are good thoughts. Bullet holes and blood. Because if you tried to escape that wall from the east to the west, the soldiers would shoot at you. People died trying to hop the wall and landed despite the barbed wire. So on one side, you have messages hopeful for freedom. And on the other side, you don't have any messages at all because people couldn't come up to the wall. And what you do have is bullet holes and blood, because that's the legacy of the Berlin Wall. This is a portion of the Berlin Wall. Those are my kids looking at it. This is in the George H.W. Bush Museum in Texas, because George H.W. Bush was president at the time that the wall came down. And in this museum on that day, walking up to that, and the graffiti there is pretty harrowing. Obviously, it's a lot of different colors. It says vision. Mason turned to me and said, "What is that?" And I love that because she didn't know. Now, I told her, right, just like I'm telling you now about communism, I told her all about it. But she didn't know because she didn't have to know. She she hasn't ever in her life done nuclear bomb drills in school. Did you know that kids used to, just like we would do a fire drill or an active shooter drill or a tornado drill, kids would do nuclear bomb drills in school. On the idea that what if Russia sends a bomb in towards our country? There was always the threat. Even though we didn't shoot at each other, there was always the threat. What if Russia actually does this? Children would practice, this is silly in hindsight, but they would practice getting under their desks as if that was going to protect them from a nuclear blast. So over the announcements, they came and said, we're doing a drill for a nuclear bomb reaction. Children would get under their desks and hide. And I like to say kiss their butts goodbye, because that desk wasn't going to do anything for them. My point is, Mason has no idea why they would do that. You don't either. You've never lived this. So Mason says, what is that? She doesn't know, and I'm glad, because she didn't have to know. And fortunately, with the legacy of many presidents who fought against communism, Kennedy, Reagan, and Bush chief amongst them, we don't have to know what communism is, because the wall came down, and hopefully the walls will always stay down. This is George Bush.
Sorry to interrupt. We're going to test in Keck's room in St. Mackenzie, so everybody will be together. I just wanted to give you some warning.
Okay.
So you could tell them. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
sounds good. This is George W. Bush shaking hands with the Soviet premier. His name is Gorbachev. This is earth-shattering at this time. The fact that these two men, those two flags, would be side by side shaking hands, that is mind-blowing. Much like Trump shaking hands with the president of North Korea, walking across the 38th parallel today. This is a great moment in world diplomacy. These two men, their countries finally agreeing to cease fire on the Cold War. to not stockpile nuclear bombs, to not threaten to shoot at each other at any given moment. Finally, the Cold War is over in this moment with George Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev shaking hands. And then this is a really a good representation of what I was describing. Children used to get under their desks to hide from a potential nuclear blast. The joke is, just like people do Revolutionary War reenactment or Civil War reenactment, this is how Cold War people would have to reenact, because this is the type of fighting that happened in the Cold War. All right, super briefly, I'm going to round it out by actually talking about these different economic and government philosophies. The big three, just listen, right? Just grow your brain in the next 10 minutes or so. The big three are capitalism, socialism, and communism. And then the spectrum, the left side of that and the right side of that, is really represented by the picture there, the political cartoon. One side is leave us alone. A lot of people would say that is Republicans, conservatives, or the Tea Party, which is even a little bit more extreme than Republicans. Hey, government, just leave me alone. My money's for me. I'll get my own health care if I need it. Don't regulate where I drive, who I visit, how I have to have a license for this, that, or the other. Just leave me alone. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side is take care of us all. And that's represented by Occupy Wall Street, if you paid attention to that in recent history. Take care of us all means have a program that gives me food. Have a program that sends me to school. Free college is a big one. Have a program that takes care of my medical. Give me a house, give me a car, give me a cell phone. Take care of me. Leave me alone or take care of me. This is the spectrum. We're going to kind of analyze the differences between on the spectrum. Capitalism is what you live under. You live under capitalism today. Capitalism is characterized by private ownership, homes, vehicles, those are personal belongings. But also, really importantly, is business. You can open whatever business you want because you think that you can sell an item. You can sell that item for whatever price the market demands. The government doesn't tell you what the price of a cell phone is. The market tells you what the price of a cell phone is. Whatever people will pay for it is the price. So high or low, it's what it's worth to the market. There's competition. This is why prices are generally low, because if they sell their cell phone for $1,001 and we sell our cell phone for $999, well, to stay competitive, I got to drop my cell phone to $998, $997 until we normalize, right? This is the price. The items go on sale. There's deals, this, that, and the other. But the competition of the free market, this is what characterizes capitalism. Ron Swanson, Uncle Ron, I like to call him Swanson. Ron Swanson says, capitalism is God's way of determining who is smart and who is poor. A little bit of a joke, but the idea is if you respond to the competition of the free market, your prices will land where they need to be. If you don't participate in the competition of the free market, you're going to be broke. And if you don't participate in capitalism at all, you're going to be oppressed. America is a capitalist country. This is what you live under. We'll take a government class in 11th grade that will really open that up for you. The other, capitalism is visible from space. Did you know that? This is Korea. South Korea, this is the Korean Peninsula. South Korea, supported by the United States, is capitalist. Okay, another capitalist country in the world. America is not the only capitalist country in the world. Capitalism is flourishing in South Korea, and at nighttime, you can literally see it from space. Point to the 38th parallel. It's the line between light and dark. Because North Korea and its oppressive communist regime, they say turn the lights off at 9 p.m., you turn the lights off at 9 p.m. That's if you have the technology at all. A lot of North Korea doesn't even have this advanced technology, literally electricity, or the ability to use, even if they have the wiring or whatnot, they're so downtrodden that they don't have the ability to have a working electricity. This is communism. This is capitalism. Where do you want to live? I think if you look at this picture, you can say capitalism is better. I want to live under capitalism. So socialism. Socialism is a in between capitalism and communism. We're going to round it out with communism. Socialism is the government or community regulation and distribution of goods and services. China is socialist. Cuba is socialist. Venezuela is socialist. Socialism, a lot of people think is a good idea because the government will provide for you, in theory. A lot of overspending in government is on socialist programs, such as free cell phones for everybody, free college for everybody, free housing for everybody. That's a socialist program. But the problem is when it's free for everybody, well, guess what? It costs somebody something. Nothing is free. And to have an item free for everybody gives you the lowest common denominator, lowest level of housing, lowest level of medical care. So the joke here is that the working class might like socialism because, hey, give me a free lunch, give me a free house, give me a free medicine. But anyone who's ever read a history book, funny picture is that the polar bear is eating a cow's head. Anyone who's ever read a history book realizes socialism doesn't work. I'm going to show you a picture of why here in just a second. Another political cartoon, pretty descriptive. Socialism is the fork. The economy is the outlet. The guy holding the fork says everyone else, or the guy's trying to give this guy a warning. He says everyone else who tried this has gotten hurt. Because by the way, you know it, it's common sense. If you put a fork into an outlet, it's going to spark. It's going to shock you. But the guy holding the fork, this is the analogy, the guy holding the fork says, yeah, well, everyone else did it the wrong way. The joke is there's not a wrong way, or there's not a right way to stick a fork into an outlet. It's going to spark. There's really not a right way to do socialism. You will wreck your economy by doing so. This is Venezuela before socialism. This is a businessman who has a store and has plenty of goods to sell. Right? The market can dictate the price of his goods, and he has plenty of food to offer. But when the Venezuelan government changed towards socialism, and the change came with different people being elected and put into their government, the change came slowly. Be careful of that. Change comes slowly, but when it's there, it's hard to fix. After socialism, this same businessman, being regulated more heavily by the government, he's got nothing to sell. Walk into that store, and you've got nothing to buy.
Sure, you're not talking about where.
Venezuela is struggling right now. Venezuela is a case study in socialism, and Kurt is paying attention to the news because he's scared that it's about to happen to America. Watch the news. Pay attention because Venezuela is an example that we should be scared to follow. And then communism. Communism is a much more extreme. Now, some people will say socialism is just politics. It's just policy. Some people will say we want to have more programs. Tax dollars should go to programs. Socialism is an attempt at a particular government. Communism is a much harsher application of socialism. Communism promotes class warfare between the haves and the have-nots, those in power, those not in power, the ruling class versus the working class. In communism, all property is publicly owned. Joke is that in communism, you don't have an iPhone, you have a Wii phone. Ha, 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 right? It's not yours, it's ours. Communal living, communal farmland, communal factories, communal transportation, etc. The government tells you where to work. You're a farmer, you're a laborer, you're an athlete, you're a teacher, right? The government tells you what your job is, you don't get a say in it. The government tells you where to live. Apartment A, apartment B, apartment C. Since your family's rich and famous, you get to come over to the mansion with me, okay? And then finally, the state tells you how much money you make. $7 an hour, $6 an hour, $3 an hour. We'll take care of you, don't worry about it, okay? Those in power stay in power. Those who have keep having. Now, the reason it works is because those in power use the military, use the government, use goods and use food and housing to oppress the poor class. I'm going to read this whole statement on the picture here, and I think some of you are going to have an aha moment. This is Joseph Stalin, leader of Russia through World War II and a little bit beyond. He's a communist dictator. This is how communist dictators worked. Stalin once ripped the feathers off of a live chicken as a lesson to his followers. He then set the chicken on the floor a distance away, right? So he just hurt this chicken, and he kicked it on the floor a few yards away from him. The chicken was bloodied and suffering immensely, yet when Stalin began to toss some bits of wheat towards the chicken, it followed him around. Macon County Fire Department, you like to fight him? What do you need? Gerardo, to where? Okay. Gerardo, guidance office, my friend. So Stalin is throwing bits of wheat to the chicken. What do you think chicken does? Follows him. Yeah, because he's provided him something. Stalin says to his followers, this is how easy it is to govern stupid people. They will follow you no matter how much pain you cause them, as long as you throw them a little worthless treat every once in a while. Like, here's $600, and here's 600 more, and here's free college, and here's free medicine. I don't know. Read the news. Communist, according to college students, I want you to look at the bottom picture first. I think it's a little out of order. College students, a lot of times liberal arts academies, whatever, idealize communism because it sounds like we're all going to be on the same level. It sounds like we all get along peachy and nice, whatever. Communism, according to history, it's the top picture, is shown, history has shown us that that does not work. It never has. Communism, according to history, is oppression and murder and guns and death and dying. Keep that in mind. This is a real fast class on a real deep topic. There's a strong link that has been found between communism and never once having opened a history book. So I hope we've opened a history book and you feel like you've learned something about paying attention to trends and how history repeats itself. Last one I'm really going to explain to you here, or just kind of read this picture.
Good morning again, Red Raiders. So we have an announcement to make with our Red Raider career visit. So we combined November and December because of Thanksgiving holidays and Christmas holidays. And so we're doing a visit this Thursday to Titan Modular, and that will be during second thought this Thursday. And we have a new group of 24 students who've been selected by your teachers. And remember, your teachers are selecting you because they see something in you. You are giving it your all in whatever this area is that you were selected. And we appreciate you for doing that and walking the Raider way. And we want to reward you by giving you an opportunity to visit an industry right here in Bacon County in which you can possibly get a job and earn your living in the future. So, without further ado, here are the students who are selected. And if you hear your name when the bell rings, please come up to the front office to get your field trip form for Thursday. Norma Palacios, Savannah Taylor, Roger Dial, Taylor Houghton, Timothy Hutchison, Lily Smith, Allison Mota Martinez, Jelijah Simpson, Riley Haggard, Madison Knowlton, Jacob Tanner, Christopher Moore, Tristan Strickland, Saul Ramirez, Christian Thrift, Katie Dominguez, Kiki Batten, Jackson Johnson, Kurt Adams, Josiah Brown, Jordan Pruitt, Abraham Mesa, and Chance Ivy. If you just heard your name called, then when the bell rings, please step up here to the front office to get your field trip form from Miss Vicki Ruiz. Or teachers, if you want to allow them to go ahead and step up now, you can do that. Have a wonderful Raider day.
Let me finish it. So how does it end?
We don't know.
So how does it end? Does it end in a nuclear winter?
Yes.
Are we a wasteland of a society because we have warred ourselves to death? We have bombed ourselves into oblivion? Or do we get to live happily ever after? Who decides?
Jesus.
Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. I like that answer. Look in the mirror. You get to decide how it all ends. You might say, everybody do this. You've got the whole world in your hands. My friends, ready for this? I have taught you world history. But, yeah. But don't let it stop there. I have finished our class, but don't let your learning stop. I hope you'll be a lifelong learner, a reader because you want to be, curious because you have more questions. We're not done totally with class, but I put the clicker down because we have finished our curriculum for the semester. So I have had a great time with you. I can only hope you've had a great time interacting with me as well. Keep your world history in a nutshell. Take it home. Tell your parents. Say, this is what I think I've learned. This is how Mr. Swanson said it as well. This is world history. You know what would be really cool is if you kept this till you were 20, and then 30, and then 40, and see how your opinion maybe changes across time as well. So, anyhow. I love you, and I mean that, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye, Mr. Swanson.
I knew you said that.
No. Just imagine.
Just wasn't trying to grab it all night whenever I'm taking
Why don't you go check you?
I need a refund.
Yeah.
You didn't even put like, man.